And this is what guided directly the work of everyone from Burning Spear to Bob Marley, Lee Perry, a lot of those people that you all know, many of whom you know, and all of their offspring. To this day, the Back to Africa was less literal than more spiritual and poetic and philosophical, right? But my view of it is this. If you do believe that Africa was a symbolic internal place to go, then the most threatening thing to your understanding of Africa is real Africans, right? The most vulnerable thing about this philosophy was the fact that you would one day meet Africans from the fantasy, and it's not what you think it is, right? And so I think that to this day, that is one of the weakest and most complicated and dangerous aspects of this cosmology. When they decided Africa can't be real, it should be symbolic to motivate us. That's powerful. But at the same time, it leaves you vulnerable to real African people who do not fit the map in your head, right? And I think that that tension, in fact, represents where we are in the global world of black politics and culture, right? The fact that now Africans are in vast numbers remaking the Western world in America, certainly in Europe, and now they're encountering blacks from the Caribbean and from other places with a view of Africa that doesn't fit these Africans that have just come, right? Reggae music, in my view, as a disciple and fan, failed right there. That was one of the greatest political and ideological failures of reggae, right? But it's also successful in that it gave Africans a language to speak to the world, right? Because it's clear to Africans who come that, wait a minute, the world isn't interested in us. It's interested in the fantasy of Africa. Well, so what do? Let's learn the fantasy. Let's learn the language of the fantasy. That's the only way we can be heard, right? So reggae did a complicated thing that could be seen as negative, but then it also offered a powerful thing that is definitely positive, right? So for Lucky Dubé, this is important though, because reggae, despite this weird ideological weakness, it allowed him and a lot of West Africans to talk about themselves without dealing with the very vicious and dangerous inter-ethnic strife that they had to deal with on a daily basis, right? Because they did not have a language of race. They had Zulu, Xhosa, Igbo, Hausa. They had ethnic languages and ethnic cultures. Reggae music and this Rastafari vision of Africa allowed them to think, maybe we're all one tribe, right? So reggae helps bring this notion that maybe all of us are in fact one people. Right? This is something people don't understand, that the idea that Africans are one people is new to Africans, as opposed to African Americans and blacks in the Caribbean, where they learned that during slavery, right? During the slave trade. So that's why Lucky Dubé appropriated it and used it. Now the funny thing is, I told you that his first album was banned, right? I think they banned it because they had no idea what this was, right? But then all of his other music was not banned. It wasn't banned, right? People wondered for a while, why wasn't it banned? Because the South African censors were really, really, really extreme, particularly when black music was being played and performed in South Africa. Well, my idea is this. The reason that they didn't ban it after the first album is that they didn't realize it had anything to do with apartheid. Why? It's an album called, the band is called The Slaves. The album is called Slave. He's singing about slavery. Nobody in South Africa knew what the hell that was about. They didn't know. Well, so many people liked Lucky Dubé because they thought it was exotic. Many people thought, oh, okay, it's Jamaican music about Jamaican people. Cool. Right? They didn't think it had anything to do with apartheid. Right? That, for me, is why he was able to get that music played, because the people in power thought of it as just, oh, it's about stuff from outside. Right? It doesn't really have anything to do with us. Of course, eventually, the audience for his music in South Africa, they knew exactly what was going on. Right? It wasn't slavery, it was apartheid. Right? Babylon was apartheid. Right? Right? Zion was no apartheid. You know?